Hello and welcome to Shape the System, where we find and tell the stories that help people to rethink the way the world works. We interview people from all over the world who are helping to change our systems for the better. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures, who help ambitious founders and their teams scale up for success. More about KPMG High Growth Ventures after the interview. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hey everyone, hope you're well. Looking forward to today's episode. It's going to be a super interesting chat with Kim Anderson, who has been discovering through COVID essentially how to, bring a business model to market that will drive a much higher take-up of plant-based diets. And it's a fascinating story and we go down a few different rabbit holes, which I find super fun as always. And, there's a lot of humility in it and there's a lot of kind of learning in it. And I think I've taken a lot of personal inspiration actually out of today's episode. So hopefully you'll all enjoy it as much as I did, and maybe some behavior change will come out of it for you personally, but really some interesting ideas and some stuff. Hopefully we're going to see a lot more from Kim Anderson and Plant City, which is the business we ultimately get to, but we do talk a lot about plant-based diets right up front. The other thing as well is that we're making it easier for people to give us a review. We've been running for over a year and do get great feedback on the show, and obviously welcome any feedback if you think of ways we can improve it. But it would help us greatly if you take 2 minutes. You can do it while you're listening to the episode. I've made it super easy. If you want to give us a review and you're not sure how to do that, just go to ratethispodcast.com/shape. So ratethispodcast.com/SHAPE, and that'll give you a really easy way to just leave a review, and that helps us. It'll help us reach new audiences and we'll get featured like we have been, which is wonderful. We've got some other news coming up soon, so stay tuned for that around some new platform partners that we're working with. So some really fun things happening and some great guests coming. As always, if you have ideas for people we should be talking to, just let me know. Hopefully you enjoy this fortnight's episode. Thanks. Hi everyone, it's Vincent Turner from Shape the System. We're talking to Kim Anderson today on the sunny Rhode Island. I think it's sunny this time of year, hopefully.
Yes, getting better. Getting better.
And we're going to be talking about plants, which is super fun, and plant-based diets, but also the impact of non-plant-based diets. And we're going to come at it from a bunch of different angles and then talk to Kim about what Plant City's doing to address some of these issues. So as always, let's just jump straight into the challenges with the way we consume food today and just go down that rabbit hole. Get us started.
So why somebody would choose a plant-based diet? That's interesting. There's a lot of reasons, usually because humans are selfish beings. We start with the health aspect, right? Because everybody wants to live a long, healthy life. So sure. It is the only scientifically proven diet that prevents and potentially reverses most of the diets that kill Americans. And so I'm sure what's doing to us is doing to you as well.
Absolutely.
Right? And there's some fabulous research on that. The science is pretty well settled. There's a great book by Dr. Michael Greger called How Not to Die. The second reason why we encourage people to eat a whole food plant-based diet is environmental devastation and most specifically climate crisis, which we all agree, I'm sure, or most do, that the science is settled on that, and that's the biggest existential threat of our lifetime.
Sure.
So the third is obviously animal ethics, but I never passed judgment because I was 54 before I learned about this. I think a lot of people we know, but we don't want to know, and that's okay because that's where I was. So it's just a matter of education on that one. And then two that I've added to that more recently. The fourth would be social justice. Most people don't realize that the folks that are forced to do this work don't wake up one morning and say, oh, yes, I want to work in animal slaughter and the demise of 7 billion land animals every year. They do that work because they have no other choices. It's an immigrant and a migrant population and a minority population, most of it. And it's in the deep recesses of the communities away from prying eyes. And those communities are often very physically and mentally ill, the people that work there and the communities, because of the effluent and all of the other things going on. So that's right now in a Black Lives Matter, people of color, and all the issues that we're really trying to be aware of and a part of a solution. That becomes really, I think, valuable information for people to understand that part of the system. And then the fifth thing, which is very new, is that this is actually As Dr. Michael Greger said, we had lunch over the summer, and he said, Kim, this was the dress rehearsal. The pandemic that we have now has a 1% death rate. The next pandemic is not going to be so kind. It could be 30 to 60% death rate. And at that point, people aren't leaving their home. They're not going to the grocery stores. They're not going to the banks. Your energy systems. I mean, as he said, it's a really bad overall situation that's unimaginable. And the next pandemic is going to come from animals that are in these hyper stressed situations.
From animals.
And
I want to come back to the pandemic thing, because that's an absolutely new angle that I hadn't even considered. And if you think about previous pandemics, it's always rooted in something coming from an animal to a human, maybe through the food supply, but maybe through the living situation as well. But I guess our living situations generally are better and better. So it's the food is the only vector. But let's come back to the first couple that you spoke about, this idea that the motivation for a lot of people moving to plant-based is health. Can we just flip that for a second? I want to understand, for the people who are still largely non-plant-based diet, I don't know what the right name for that is, largely meat-based diet, I guess. Like, what are the health afflictions that those are what's that leading to in people?
Well, so the top two diseases that can actually be reversed, there's scientific reversal, is cardiac disease and type 2 diabetes. And the most amazing movie to watch about that would be Forks Over Knives and What the Health. Those two really focus on cardiac and then type 2 diabetes. Because I don't want to have to be in a position to try to blurb out science to you. I want to be in a position to say to people, it's there, go get it, right? And it's an informative, interesting way to get it. So, yeah, and Dr. Greger's book, 11 of the top 15 things that kill Americans, if you take out suicide, murder, and accident, can all be prevented by a whole food plant-based diet. And that's not a junk food plant-based diet. That's a whole food plant-based diet. And there's a difference. There's a difference.
Right.
You know what the difference is.
We'll get to that in a minute, because I'm pretty sure that's part of the Plant City component. And then the second thing, which was, I thought a big part of the rationale and the thinking here was the environmental considerations. And as you said, the science is very clear on the climate-based cost of purely at a CO2 level of largely meat-based consumption and therefore production. But I'm interested in some of the other impacts environmentally in terms of water or soil or these types of things. There's a whole lens on that as well, right?
Yeah, there is. There's a thing online called the Vegan Calculator. You can look it up. It's published by Cowspiracy, another great film. And if you put in how many years and months you've been plant-based, it will tell you how much you saved of grain, water, forest, animals, carbon. So you can really actually look at your footprint of what a change from an animal diet to a plant-based diet saves from the environment. It's fascinating, because Plant City has served almost 650, 700,000 guests in our 22 months, that we've been open. And if you put that into the calculator, we've saved 7 million pounds of carbon from going into the atmosphere by eating just one restaurant in one city, the smallest state in the country. Right. So, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. The magnifying on that gets big.
Yeah. It's a big number.
And yes, I mean, these are huge. The numbers get very big very quickly when you start to move populations, obviously. And I want to get to how you move them in a minute, because I think there's some really interesting stuff that's going on in there. But I'm interested in the frictions at the moment. And you talked before about, I didn't discover this way of eating or this, some of these lenses until somewhat recently. I think I didn't get the exact age, but we don't need to go back to it. But I'm curious as to, like, in your observation or in your understanding of the science, what if people are aware of this information and it's all out there, awareness isn't the issue then? Is it behavior change typically that's the problem?
I don't think people are aware of this. I really don't.
Okay.
I really don't. We talk about electric vehicles and we talk about wind and solar, but we don't really talk about our food systems that much. It really hasn't hit mainstream press as much as it needs to. Now, the Chinese government a year ago said our people are going to eat 50% less meat. And that's good for all of us, because you know what? If the rising Chinese middle class decides tomorrow they want to eat the 9 ounces that Americans eat every day of animal protein, we're utterly screwed, right? We would need 5.5 more planets. We don't have 5 enough more planets. And they will have the money to strip every forest for all the grazing and all the grain, and we'll be just sitting there going, what just happened? So we really need to show the world a sustainable food system that's from plants that's delicious and freaking awesome.
Right. And so just getting back to this awareness idea, because I guess there's this kind of bubble that emerges around people who already have a direction to it, or that's not the right word, but pre-dereliction, I think is the right word. But they're already open to the idea, or they are surrounded by people who are already moving in that direction, or they've started moving in that direction themselves. From your observation or estimates, are we talking there's still 90% of the population who don't think that way or even have an awareness of that? What does it look like?
I don't know, but I just know that I was 54 before I had any clue about this. So, and I consider myself intelligent, successful, caring, empathetic, right? But I just wasn't aware. I had my head down, was doing my business, and my son stepped in my line of fire.
And just I'd like to put a kind of a personal example on that. Pre-54, what was your daily kind of diet look like? Was it meat with two or three of your meals a day? Like give me a sense of what a meat eating diet.
It's the same as everyone else, right? A animal protein, a starch, a vegetable, a fruit for a snack, and I've always eaten what I considered healthy, so I tried to do chicken and fish, right? So less red meat, but who's defining healthy?
Right. And then coming back to government and policy for a second, because I think when you think about I think it came out of the 70s or the 80s, that wonderful, and I say wonderful with air quotes, but that wonderful triangle that sort of showed the grains and then the meats and then the dairies and the vegetables in there somewhere. And this is kind of the definition of healthy that's been provided by, public policy and government. And you're saying in China then that's just changing. Is there an element here that government needs to understand a more broad or nuanced view of what healthy means? Like, where's the science going wrong here?
Yeah, absolutely. And who's at the spear of that work is Neil Barnard at the PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine in Washington, D.C. Right. They actually lobby and work with the national group in Washington, D.C. that sets that food pyramid. And Canada recently, a few years back, changed theirs.
Really?
Milk does not do a body good, despite what the advertising and the billions of dollars that went into that campaign tell you. And there's great
the one with the milk on the lip thing. You were talking about that.
And it says milk does body good, right? So, and the science is settled on that, but great videos on that, like ditch dairy, dairy's scary. There's Dr. Neil Barnard's a hero, and if you look up anything of his with dairy, he's written books on being addicted to cheese, and it's real and it's there for anybody who wants to look it up. But sometimes you just have to stumble across the seed that says, I should be looking this up. Or I should be learning more, or wow, I had no idea. Let me go learn more.
Sure. And I'm also curious because and this may not be the case. I get the feeling Australia might be a kind of a testing ground for some of these ideas in, chains. I don't want to call them fast food specifically. Some of them aren't, but they're chains where they're saying, you can now, they have meatless options, but they quite often focus on the replacement of red meat. And this kind of, to your point of having the triangle that still has a bunch of fish and chicken and these other things on it, moves well beyond that. It sounds like it's not enough to just go from red meat. I think I was looking at a breakdown of purely just of CO2 outputs, and going from red meat to no red meat was good, was like 3.4 down to 2.5, but it was still a long way from like sub 1.5. It's not enough. Is that correct?
No, it's going to need a system-wide change.
Right.
Yeah, and that's why our family is the first thing we did when we heard about this information is we were a family office investing in renewables, solar, wind, geothermal, things like that, as well as carbon sequestration, battery storage, whatever we could find to fight climate. And then when our son brought this to us, it was really, okay, we need to pivot because the fastest way we can reduce those GHGs is through a plant-based diet. At least you can get, if we could reduce 50% of the Americans' populations of eating 50% of their meat and just reduce that, we could drop these numbers pretty radically. It's going to be a long time before everybody has it's going to be a long time before everybody has wind and solar, and then we have a grid to handle it and the battery storage to handle it and that whole system. So speaking of systems, right? But tomorrow, if half the world ate half the meat, it would be a dramatic reduction. The numbers vary, and there's some people that say 17. There's a new report that says up to 35. But wherever percent it falls in, call it 17 to 22% of the world's global greenhouse gases coming from an animal agriculture system. It's a big number. because
That's a huge
transportation
number.
is somewhere around 19 or 20%, right? It's a massive number. If you think of all the things that I said in the beginning, right? Healthcare costs. Think of the healthcare costs of a nation or a country or a continent who's fighting cardiac disease and type 2 diabetes at these massively scaling up numbers. It'll bankrupt us. Right? And that's just, that takes a backseat to climate for sure, but it's a big part of this diet clicks all the boxes, right? All of them.
And you've you've got to say, well, how many more reasons do you want? If you don't want the climate reason, I've got another one for you.
Right.
I shouldn't be laughing, obviously, the nature of the seriousness of this. I think there's clearly a broad spectrum of people for whom they're not running into this information, whether it's their son's not coming in and tell them about it, which was your example, or they're not seeing it in their ordinary walk of. If you talk about trying to move 50% of the population to consume 50% less meat, there's an awareness issue, but there's a behavioural issue. And I want to get onto the behavioural issue a little bit because I think this plays into what Plant City is doing. Like, I remember talking to someone about 10 years ago. I went through a stint of being completely vegetarian. I came back to eating a bit of meat, and I'm pretty much back to being vegetarian again now. But I'm still some dairy, to be fair, but not a lot. And I remember talking to someone, and their response to me was, "Oh, I grew up on a farm, and that was what we did, and I don't know that I could ever do that." Like, what's happening when people are pushing up on the information, even though they're aware of the issue? What are you saying?
There's so much family and culture and emotion wrapped around food, right? So what we're trying to do as a family office that invests in plant-based alternatives is a two-pronged solution.
Sure.
Delicious foods that can substitute, and some are going to be plant-based because some people, if they can find a good Beyond Meat burger, will say, okay, I'll eat that. But then there will be some that will say, I'm never going to go that way. And for those people, what we're investing in is cellular agriculture or clean meat or no-kill meat. There's a lot of different names for it.
Got it.
And that's really growing rapidly, billions of dollars being pumped into that. When we first started investing in it, there was only 3 companies globally, even publicly talking about doing it. It was like,
how long ago was that?
There were only about 3 companies that were talking about it publicly. Now there's, oh my gosh, over 40, 50 that we're even aware of. There's probably a bunch still in stealth mode. Sure. It's actually the moonshot because they can take a sample, the pinky fingernail size from a host, from an animal. And basically, this is very raw. Go get the information, but brew it in vat like beer, right?
Right, really?
And make billions of pounds of beef in a vat rather than on a cow. Now, when there's price parity, who's McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's going to order from? You get the same price from the cow or from the vat bioreactor. This one's got no E. coli potential, no mad cow disease potential, no hopped up on hormones and antibiotics, and no teenagers and people picketing your front door because you're an environmental devastation arm, right? And no so all of this stuff gets taken off the table, which is why it's called clean meat.
Right. And just dwell on that for a bit, because it sounds like some of this is saying, let's go and find great alternatives for people now, that for people who want to change, but like food, and I'm again making air quotes, but like the variety of things, or there's a behavioural aspect of it, or they're used to ordering a burger and it feels weird when there's just salad in there. Give them an option. And I think you're seeing this in a lot of cases, and we'll get to Plant City in a second because I think that's a lot of where Plant City is. But then there's also this idea that there's a whole bunch of meat replacements, or clean meat as you call it. I read somewhere a few weeks ago that we're about 5 years from price parity on that stuff.
Yeah.
Does that sound about right?
There's a lot of different guesses on that, but I will say that when we first invested in this was 5 years ago, a meatball was $300,000. We didn't even get to see it other than in a video, right? I'm sitting
and you
on
invested still.
A salad with one meatball, right? And now, from what I'm hearing, it's under $100 and dropping fast. Now, who knows how long it will take? I think that in Singapore, they did have a restaurant in December serving clean meat chicken at a meal over the holidays.
Right.
So, but it was expensive, right? But
Sure.
now it needs to come down. But I just keep remembering when I was a kid, calculators with these big bulky things, and they were $150. Now, like they're free and they're in your phone. So, right, the R&D to get you to the beginning is a lot, and then it just goes swamp, right? Look at our first phones from our now phones,
sure,
right? And so I'm sure that I'm hopeful that that's what will happen with that. But there's two different kinds of plant-based, right? So. What we do in the restaurant is we make everything by hand. What we invest in is prepared foods because that's what the marketplace is, right? So you have burgers and chicken and Alpha Burritos, this amazing company that we invested in. They do chicken strips and chicken tenders and, chicken air quotes.
Right.
And it's so close to real. I've got this woman that comes in the market every week. She's buying bags of the chicken tenders. It's the only thing our 3-year-old will eat, and the family's plant-based. So, that their kid whips those out and their friends got the ones from McDonald's and nobody knows the difference. So it's just making it easier.
Right.
So there's all this wide range of options.
Totally. And I want to pause for everyone for a second because there's two lenses to our conversation here today. One is the family office. It's Evermore. Have I got that right?
Everhope.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Evermore's a band, I think. I'm getting my Evers confused. It's early over here. Everhope. And that family office has been investing in sustainable stuff for quite a while, but the food aspect of that only in the last 5 or 6 years. Is that right?
The renewable stuff, like 6 or 7, if I'm guessing correctly. And then the food stuff around 5. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And so that's sort of been an arc of a story for you, which is what are all the levers for sustainability? And then at some point your son walks in and you're like, holy crap, there's a whole part of the equation we're missing.
Correct.
And then Plant City, let's talk a little bit about Plant City for a while, because my understanding is there's one, I thought there was 4 outlets. Is there 1 or 4?
Okay, so Plant City is 4 restaurants with 3 full bars, with a cafe, coffee bar, bakery, community space, event space, and a marketplace.
Got it. Okay, so it's one venue that has all of that in it.
And my partner is Matthew Kenny, right? So when I decided to do this, I know nothing about food, but I'm a social entrepreneur who wants to leverage businesses to scale change on massive needs for change. And so if you're going to do something, you've got to lead with really delicious food. So I tapped into a friend that we'd made through the industry, and he's the top plant-based chef in the world out of LA. He has 40 restaurants now, 80's open during COVID on 5 continents. And his food is phenomenal. We were fans of him, fans of his food. So if I'm going to do this, I need somebody, my partner, who's got the recipes, who's got the great food already in the bag, know what it is, known commodity. And so
reputation.
Correct. Yes. Very, very well known globally in this space.
Right. And the way that the restaurant operates, how long has the restaurant been going for other space been going?
In June of 2019, we were only open 8 months before COVID hit, now about 22 altogether.
Okay. 22 months. 7 million pounds or something of CO2 saved.
Yeah.
Whole lot, a huge impact already. And what that's doing this is in Rhode Island, is that right?
Yes.
Yep, cool. And so what this is allowing people to do is it's a place where they would ordinarily go to a normal food court, I think is what we'd call it in Australia. I think it's probably the same name there. And they have what are a bunch of options. I shouldn't say appear to be a bunch of options, but they have a whole bunch of options, and all of those are plant-based. Is part of that about actually saying to people, did you realize that this was on offer in this ecosystem? Yes. For sure. Yes. It's awareness as much as anything. I didn't
want to just do a restaurant. I wanted to do a restaurant, 4 restaurants. I wanted to put a stake in the ground and said, this is what you can have. There's pre-COVID, I think we have 280 items on the menu. Every day we make 85 sauces, cheeses, and dressings fresh in the lower level prep areas. It's just this smorgasbord of choices. We've got an Italian restaurant with a beautiful pizza oven from Italy with the most amazing pizzas you've ever had. We've got a Mexican restaurant with this big tequila bar and the most beautiful burritos. I mean, go to our Instagram, Plant City Providence. If you've seen
put all the links.
The food is amazing. Downstairs, we have a burger bar called New Burger, and it's got chicken sandwiches, burger bars, and chili and cheese fries, like typical American dining food.
Fair.
And then around the corner, we have this thing called Makeout, which stands for Matthew Kenny Takeout. And it's like a Chipotle line where you start at one end and you build a bowl and you get to the other end.
Right.
And that's also got a bakery and a coffee bar there. So those are the kind of the 4 options. And then we've even got to grab and go in the beginning. Like if you're in a rush, you can grab a pad thai salad and a chia pudding and be out the door.
Right. Perfect. And one of the things I'm curious about, and I think you'd know this, you said you've had about 700,000 people through over that 22 months period, I think.
Yeah.
How many of those people now, now that you've been open for a little while, 22 months is in the grand scheme of things not a long time, but long enough to start to get a sense of how many people on a day-to-day basis are coming in for the first time and, getting an awareness and an education as much as a meal versus people like, cool, this is how I can eat now. 1 in 3 of my meals a week I can get from here.
Yeah.
How does that balance look?
That's a great question, right? So only 80% of our guests are not plant-based. A friend told them they saw a picture of this awesome pizza and burrito on their Instagram and they want to come check it out. Our food is so good that I know if somebody comes in once, they are coming back and they will tell a friend. So for me, the food is the delivery system for the message. I'll often have a woman, dragging the guy through the front door like this, and he's looking at me like, "Oh dear God, what am I myself into?" The name Plant City freaks a few people out, right? But
yeah.
But I'm like, it's okay, bud. You like burgers? You like pizza? You like burritos? You want a good drink? You're in the right place. And he's like, "Oh my God, I thought I was going to have to eat lettuce and
got a foosball table in the corner."
Right. They don't know what to expect. And once they come in and see it, and I know they're coming back, and that's how we built this. Really, even during COVID, I've been able to hang on to 138 of our employees, break even, hunker down, get through it. And now it's just starting to really emerge with some sunshine, and
things are starting to go in the right direction. I heard that you just hit the 100 million vaccines in 58 days or something. So that sounds like progress from where we're looking in Australia, where we're not affected as much, I think, to be fair. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about the grab and go thing, because I think there's something interesting here which plays into, there's an awareness part of, I didn't know food like this could taste like this, or it doesn't taste like what I would imagine. It's not rabbit food. It's the common refrain I keep hearing from people who are quite meat centric. But the grab and go piece talks to something else in the behavior, which is it's inconvenient. And how has that sort of come about? Was it always a start with let's lead with food and then we've got these options, or it came out of COVID? Talk to me a little bit about the grab and go stuff, or the takeaway kind of component.
So the grab and go is inside. We've just got this case that's a refrigerated case that's kind of stocked with options. But really when COVID hit and we locked it down, we had to get our food out the door because nobody was coming in. So we have some spots up front that are curbside pickup. And, and we have out the back door, we do delivery. I have 10 to 12 delivery drivers on full time.
Right, really?
On the outside, I did a takeout window.
Sure.
You can walk up to the building, talk to the woman through the glass or the guy at the counter and order your food. So we literally were spinning 3 different plates out 3 different doors without anybody coming in. And it was like our governor was going to shut us down, but the day before she was, all of my employees, we have an amazing staff. They were nervous, and a lot of them were like, "Kim, I'm not coming back." And I'm like, I get it. And so they were headed for the doors because it was panic. And so I said to Chef, you know what? We just need to close. We'll hunker down, and 2 weeks from now we'll be coming back, right? But
well, when was this, by the way? April last year or something?
It was March 15th, 1 year ago this week.
Right.
And that night, Chef called me, and because we had 168 employees at that point, maybe more, because it was we were doing quite well. And he said, Kim, we've got a lot of people here. I've got about 50 people who can't afford to stay home. Right. Because in our country, when you go on unemployment, you get 60% of your pay. Right. And they really need to stay here, and they want to stay here. So we had an app which had delivery and takeout, or drive-through. And so we just put it on social media that night. We're closed. We're sending our employees home. There are some that still want to work. We hope you come drive by or get delivery of our food to help keep this 50 people employed. Sure. And the response was overwhelming. We lost money, but we didn't lose everything.
Patronage, right?
And we hunkered down, and we built it and built it and built it and built it. And by Friday of that first week, the orders are spitting off the thing like this, and Chef's like, I have to turn it off. Just stop the bubble machine, because they're literally, he picked them up and threw them on the floor about 60 feet long, each one. And he's like, I have to stop the app because we can't do this. We don't have enough delivery drivers. So I was calling all the servers and saying, come in and deliver for us. You want a job?
Can you write a scooter, please?
Right. So, it's been, talk about pivoting. Every single day we pivoted on what we had to do. But
Right.
We made it work.
Well, I mean, but I think the thing that I think is emerging out of this is we've seen a whole bunch of behavior change that happened very quickly during the last 12 months to the day, to your point. And some of that behavior change seems to be enduring. People can change their behavior quickly enough when there's a severe motivation or a severe systemic change, in this case being an external pandemic, ironically caused by the thing that you're ultimately trying to address in part.
It is the ultimate irony, isn't it?
But it's to my understanding, Plant City now is thinking about this in an enduring way, which is if you can make this food amazing to eat, at a price point that is competitive from when I go there, I'm full. When I go here, I'm full and I enjoy the meal. And then you add in the convenience factor of delivery and drive through, I think we'd call it.
It's more like drive by.
Is this part of drive by? I don't know about that word in America, but sure.
Yeah, we've got 5 parking spots. We've got 5 parking spots in front. You drive up. If you've already put your order on the app, you text us when you get there and somebody runs your food out. It's literally almost as fast as drive through. But what's really important is back in September, approaching our winter, I was very nervous that we're not going to have a takeout window. What's going to happen to us, right? We don't have outdoor dining. It's all going to go away. And I was very nervous. So I opened 7 weeks ago after working on it over the fall, Plant City X, which is a drive-through. Because
a pure drive-through
with a counter service, kind of like a McDonald's. And we were able to take our food, which I think is very reasonably priced. This big, huge burger for $14 with a salad on, this. For the drive-through, we went a little bit smaller and we were able to get it down to $9. Right? So that's a fairly reasonable price this is not your mama's drive-through, right? This is not burgers that are shipped in a truck, thrown in the freezer, thrown on a griddle and put in a bread and out the window. Everything there is also made daily, but made so that it can go out the door quickly. And we opened that 7 weeks ago. It's been very successful and people are loving it. Much smaller menu. It's really the new burger, American.
The best of the best.
Correct. And what could be done quickly and what could be done less expensive.
Sure.
And it's been very successful. And I think what I'm also trying to do is COVID proof it as much as I can. Yes, the employees on the inside, you're going to have to keep them healthy. But the drive through, we can pull 65 cars an hour through.
Right.
So, if you're looking at an average order of $20, that's a pretty good hour. And you multiply that times we're open from 7 in the morning till 11 at night or 8 in the morning till 11 at night. Not every hour is a peak hour, but we can do a really darn good business. Right.
And that's sort of my question here is I think there's 2 things that start to happen that I think are fascinating. The distributed, one on not every corner, but the kind of Starbucks model where people are seeing it and they're aware that that's an option and those things are as much advertising and awareness as they are a place to buy the product. Fantastic model, proven, you don't need to reinvent it. Combined with a price point product that is cheap enough for someone to say, well, that is a substitute to the thing I was otherwise doing, but it ticks a bunch of other boxes for me. So whereas I was buying fast food 3 times a week, I'm now buying it 3 times, but one of them includes this Plant City option. And then the economics of that works enough that those things are self-sustaining. Is that sort of where this is starting to emerge, starting to land?
Yes. I've actually been driving around New England, which is the Northeast of the United States, since the day Plant City X opened, because it was phenomenally successful. Like the cars were half a mile down the highway to get in.
Right.
So I've been driving around New England trying to find locations, and it's been very, very, very difficult. So I think what we're leaning to, we just hired a consultant. I'm not sure if it's going to work out, but what we're leaning to is looking at franchising.
Right. Yeah, I would. I mean,
that way
it seems like the default, right?
Give people an opportunity to have their own business because this is their care, and also rapidly. For me, it's not about money. It's about rapid mission expansion, and so that makes it the best way to do it.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting because I think Australia is certainly seeing more and more of the kind of established franchise fast food joints, let's use that as a category, are starting to go in this direction where they say, well, we have a plant-based option. So if you want to come here and you already want to do that, then it's plant-based, but the mission isn't there. The purpose isn't there at all.
But that's great that there's options
Which is good. Absolutely.
Dunkin' Donuts doesn't spend millions of dollars advertising their plant-based Just Egg, Beyond Meat, sausage sandwich because they want to see if there's a market out there. They know that there's a market out there.
Right.
And even actually take that one step further, which is really interesting. Companies like Tyson are investing in plant-based foods and these cellular ag companies because they quote unquote would rather be a disruptor than get disrupted. These companies know this arc is coming and they don't want to get left behind. So they're kind of trying to straddle it and be a part of it. But you know what? great
Good.
because we need
Yeah.
more people eating plant-based foods.
Yeah, and in a lot of respects, if you go and set up, 100 yards, to use an American thing, but 100 meters for everyone else, from a McDonald's or whoever, then you're almost putting a stake in the ground to say to these companies, hey, people are going to come here, and when you see a line here, you need to replot your course, which is I think that's when the tide truly lifts all boats. That's a super place to be.
Wait, I have to tell you because this is really funny. Plant
Sure.
X is wedged between a Taco Bell and a Burger King.
I love it. I wish I could see that photo of a couple of people dribbling into one, and then this.
There's one in between there that's a closed down old restaurant, but it's Taco Bell, us, this old restaurant, and Burger King.
Perfect.
Yeah, it is perfect, isn't it?
Oh, I mean, it's poetic. I think it's probably the words I'd be looking for. But let's just repaint this out because I want to get to what the challenge here is at this point for you guys. You clearly can have proven that if you create a venue that has a whole bunch of options, then people will be educated by that and they will, become a repeat customer of that and be actively looking for that option, which you can fulfill. But if they get it somewhere else, then that's great too. You prepackage the best hits, if you like, combined with the things that can be made really well, and put that into a smaller form that essentially can be distributed and set up, anywhere you can find a location. And you work out that the economics for that thing works both for the customer and for the site itself, for want of a better word.
Yep.
What's the biggest barrier now to get from, 4 of these to 440 of these, or whatever the number is?
Bandwidth.
The visual there, by the way, was you grabbing your head in case for people who are just listening on audio.
Yeah, we've brought on a consultant who's a globally successful franchise developer CEO who's had a lot of wonderful success. And if we can get everything lined up quickly, then we put a team around it. So it's time and money. That's okay. We're not taking money out of Plant City. It certainly didn't make any during COVID, but as it starts now gearing up, all of that will go into this, as well as, we're going to have to feed it as well.
Right.
But time and money, and then just finding the right people to run these,
Right.
We want the people to come forward to say, this matters to me. I'm going to work this thing. I'm going to make it successful. I'm going to help you find a great location, and we're going to get it up fast and get going. And so
Sure.
The good news is, since we opened, almost every day I have people saying to me, oh my God, you should open one of these in Nashville, or oh my gosh, please come to Maine, or oh gosh, we need one of these in Austin so badly. And I want one of these in Connecticut. Will you please come to Connecticut? I think that when I go viral with a franchising program that makes sense and can allow somebody to make some good income, that has shown us in 7 weeks that we've got a wonderful young guy running it with a team of 35, three sets of 11, that it's a turnkey thing that can be done. And we'll have a school where they can come and work in Plant City X and learn the system, just like McDonald's. You got to go to McDonald's school or whatever, right?
Right. Academy.
Right. And then go home and do it, right? Just like plug and play. And how quickly can we... And the limiting factor for me at this point has been finding locations and building them. The good news with Plant City, the original location, that was a steakhouse and a strip club on the second floor.
Woo.
And I retrofitted it in 5 months. And then the Plant City X was a former Papagino's, signed the lease on October 15th and opened January 15th. The kitchen wasn't right. It was old. It needed a lot of interior work, but I brought in a team. I'm an interior designer. I designed it. I GC'd it, and our team executed. And so can I find people all over the country who are smart, who care, who are capable, who have operational excellence, who can find a location, who can finance it, who can get it built and open, right? That's the trajectory. Right. I think I can. Right. I think we can. I think there's enough people out there now that want to be a part of the solution that they would gladly participate in this. If any indications that people who've said that to me in the past show up, we'll be good. And I would like to do it globally too.
I mean, I think any Western market that has the kind of the 5 indications or the 5 vectors that you spoke about right at the front is absolutely going to be thinking, well, I see the opportunity here. I remember there's a chain in Australia. It's kind of like a Chipotle, I guess you'd call it. It's the Guzman y Gomez is the name of it. And I remember when the first one opened up in Sydney, and I went to the guys and emailed them and said, this is going to be big. I can tell this is going to be big. And they're like, oh, we really appreciate your thought. I'm like, no, you've got everything right. You've nailed the branding on this. You've got the menu right. The systems are good. I can see something that's going to be big. I already know. It's the Guns N' Roses of its time, right? And it's about to IPO. They've got 400 locations. I think when people walk into something and see something working, they're immediately two thoughts usually. Wow, this is going to be big, and how do I get involved?
Correct. You're absolutely right. And Plant City feels that way, which is why so many
Sure.
people said it. But so does Plant City X. It's bright, it's happy, it's clean. Our team are a lot of, Gen Z, millennial, really great young people who are mission aligned with us.
Right.
Who, look, this generation, that generation, they don't want to work making widgets.
Right.
They want work that's meaningful and has value and is going to help them save the mess that our generation's created.
Right.
And they love this work. So we want to be the Disney World of food. Like when you drive up to our window, the people actually like, hey, how you doing? Welcome to Plant
Yeah, I'm really happy you're here. I love the thing I'm about to talk to you about.
Right. And you feel it. Like, how often do you go and write on an interview on like Google a review and say, God, the staff was great. You did a drive-through window and a pickup window. How do you know my staff was great? Because they came through and showed this amazing personality. Then they made you feel like you were wanted to be there. So if you've got great food and great people and a great environment, I don't think you can lose so long as it's priced right.
Right. I think that's right. And I think it sounds like you've got the economics right on both sides. I want to understand a little, because you talked a bit about values and mission there. And, you got to start with a great product, I think, for any business to be successful. Like, it's got to be good. It's got to do what it says on the tin, and people have to come away thinking that was magical in some way. And, I think that's certainly the underlying starting point. But for people to want to come and be part of turning that into something successful, they have to have a reason for being there. And the environmental credentials are a big part of that. Is there other kind of keywords you'd use to describe the kind of the values of the business and the people and the venture that you're building here, or the movement, probably the right word?
Yeah, it is a great culture in the building, that just this kind of happiness and joy because they know what they're doing matters. And I'm really happy that, we counter servers in this country don't make a lot of money. I start everyone at $12 an hour. That's way above.
Minimum's like $8 or something.
Right. But on top of that, our guests are very generous. So they're leaving between, at least for the first few weeks that I've been following, between $17 and $20 an hour. And that's the entire staff that's on during that shift. The dishwasher, the guy who's making the tofu, burgers, and the people at the window and everybody preparing the food, everybody. So that's really great, because at that, not only do you feel good about what you're doing, but you're getting...
Yeah, you can sustain yourself. Correct. Literally.
Correct. Right. And it's the right thing to do. But, as you said, if I'm going to franchise this and build this and build the mission, that piece has to work.
Right. Yeah. And it's got to be ingrained enough that when the first person who heard about it or walked into one and said, I'd like to own one of these, they take that out the door, and then the recreation of that in Nashville or Austin feels the same.
Correct. And it's authentic. It's
them actually talking.
Put on. It's really authentic.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think if people are attracted to the mission, then it will be authentic. But there's always an execution challenge, which is, are they as kind of focused on it? And the more you systemize it, the more you'll get to that.
And you can tell my passion, right? I mean, right. I literally lived at Plant City for the first 8 months, and I'm at the door and I'm greeting people,
hammock out the back,
and I'm sweeping out front and picking up I'm everywhere,
right?
And I'm all in, and the staff knows, like, if you need a table bust, I'm going to do it. If you need drinks brought into the dishwasher, I'm going to do it.
Right.
And that builds this, we're all in this together, and she's willing to do the work that I'm going to do. It matters. And the way I treat the guests, they're like a guest in my home. That filters down to everybody else.
Yep.
It has to start at the top.
Yeah. And I think in some respects, there's things you don't need to reinvent, which is, run a business incredibly well. Jack Welch used to talk about mopping the floors. I think it was at GM or whatever it was, where you had to be on the ground. You had to understand what was happening on the ground. And you had to lead by example, literally lead by example, by mopping the floors.
I have to tell you the greatest Jack Welch story. My father used to work with him years ago. He sold plastic machinery. But 3 summers ago, I had the pleasure of meeting him because his wife, Susie, is a very big vegan advocate. And I'm sure she would tell you, she would go around New York slapping stickers on windows of fur salons and food trucks. And she's like, she's all out there. And we were sitting in their living room and I was talking to Jack about what I do and how I do it. And this was right before Plant City opened, but it was about our investing and how we're trying to share the message. Because I have a nonprofit that I've been working on to try to share the message and learn how to do that. He's man of very few words. He said, Susie, you should just listen to her. I thought that was a really high compliment for an amazing man who's been a hero for my family for, 2 generations.
And I think that's a wonderful segue to, if I had to be perfectly honest and brutal, my imagination of someone running a family office in the, what's the upper northeast?
The Northeast.
What's that area?
Yeah.
The Northeast,
yeah.
The Connecticuts of the world and the Rhode Islands.
Yeah.
It's kind of this stuffy thing where you're trying to work out how to make money on infrastructure and all these kind of, stereotypical things. But this isn't the nature of the family office. I want to understand how, you and your husband or who I don't know who's driving all of this kind of thinking arrived at, operating a family office in this way. Like where does this come from?
We have a family office that came from a wealth event of my father-in-law, and it's my husband and his sister and her husband. And they have, I think, 11 or 12 employees, and it covers all aspects of investing, public securities, real estate, philanthropy, estate, all, what a typical family office does.
Sure.
But when our son graduated with an environmental studies degree from an Ivy League college, he came home and he was like, we have means and we have an obligation to invest against climate crisis because this is the biggest threat of my life and my children's. And so it was interesting. My husband's like, okay, well, I have a day job. I'm all in. I agree with you. But how do we learn how to do this? So once you decide you want to be an impact investor against climate crisis, it's like, okay, now what do I do? Right. And so I literally went for a year around the country going to every single impact conference I could find. South by Southwest, SoCap in LA, High Water Women, like dozens of them. We joined organizations of sustainable investors to find deal flow. It's a big job. And then when you move money from a traditional investment to some of these new investments, that has to, it has to have ROI, right? You have a fiduciary responsibility to the family to not take money out of something that's doing well and put it into something that's not actually going to do so well, even if it's going to change the world. So looking for the impactful businesses that are successful and can give ROI, that was a challenge. And it's work that still goes on. It's still going on. But my husband approached the investment committee basically talking about risk management, right? So, we, get out of fossil fuels. And we finally did that. And because honestly, and it's starting now to be talked about, especially Larry Fink from BlackRock. I mean, his letters and his shots across the bow of companies come up with a net zero plan for your net zero economy, or, you're going to be in trouble.
Wither on the vine.
Right. You're not fulfilling your fiduciary responsibility if you're not paying attention to the elephant in the room. It's coming. Major change is coming. And who knows when it will be, but we won't have peak oil. We're going to have peak demand. At what point is it going to be that the cost of getting it out of the ground through a pipeline across the continent to a place where they put it in barrels and send it off somewhere? Does that become more expensive, even with the subsidies, than solar? And when that hits, and it's already starting to be priced in, I think, and I'm not an expert on this. I listen to my husband and I try to understand it. I got my hands in a lot of barrels, but Did
you say barrels, by the way? That was ironic.
It makes sense. And when you read the people who know what they're talking about, like a Tony Seba, look up his videos. The most recent one he did is just mind-boggling.
Sure. And then, like, from family office to sustainability through a lens of your son, who's sort of provided an affluence or at the time that led you to a new direction, completely new, not even slightly. And then how did the Plant City Park come out of all that?
That's a great story.
I'm going to open a restaurant.
So now, like 7 years ago, we're like all in environmentalists, right? Okay.
Sure.
We're in this fight and we're going to try to figure out how to solve this. And my son came down with chronic Lyme disease. I don't know if you have that in Australia, but it's pretty prevalent in the region that we're from. And some people beat it and some people don't. And my son was pretty sick. So we took him out of a master's program in business and basically he had this port in his chest getting serious antibiotics.
Right.
And he said, you know what? I'm not going to lay on the couch for a year getting these antibiotics pumped into my system without spending a lot of time researching, almost like a thesis paper of what can I eat and how can I help my gut protect itself against this onslaught of antibiotics. And he came away with this really strong understanding of a whole food, plant-based diet as being the best way to heal the gut, treat the gut, protect what's happening to his gut. And because that is, if you read things on microbiome, and the Rich Roll's got an amazing podcast on the microbiome recently, a must listen to. He came away understanding, okay, whole food, plant-based diet. And then he started reading about the stuff other than health, which is the environment and all the things we're talking about. And he says, well, wait a minute, I just graduated from a prestigious university with an environmental studies degree, and we never talked about this. And so we put the two together, and he's like, whoa, well, we need to quickly start investing in plant-based foods because this is the way we can move that needle. And we were going through a time, 4.5 years ago where we were electing a president that we knew who would take us backwards on environmental. And we were right. We knew that would happen. And we were devastated about what was going to happen, coming out of the Paris Accord and all that ridiculous stuff. So he was really kind of down about it. And I said, you know what, I'm going to use the principles of business to try to figure out how to share this message that I can move people from animal agriculture to plant-based eating. Because for every one, I can show you on the vegan calculator how much carbon I can save from going into the atmosphere. So I set about trying to figure out how to scale those numbers. And I started a group in Rhode Island called Powered by Plants RI. And every month we would do a potluck. We'd do an Ask a Doc night, a movie night. I did movie nights at my home. Every 2 weeks, I would invite 100 people and 15 would show up until I personally moved about 250, 300 people from animal-based to plant-based eating. And I kept a list for my son. So I could say, honey, see, I'm learning how to do this. I'm figuring out the messaging and I'm learning how to do this, right? And the thing that happened when I would touch back with these folks that were friends of mine that were going plant-based, they'd say, you know what, Kim, I can do this at home, but I can't go out. I'm a social pariah. I can't go to a restaurant. When I go with my family, they're rolling their eyeballs at me. I'm sitting at the end of the table, negotiating with the server. I'm taking too long. They don't even want to go out with me anymore, right? They're calling me names. And so I just don't do it when I go out. Isn't that a shame that we have to compromise our values on these things that matter so much to us because we're taking too long to order or it's just too difficult to do it? And that's when I thought, you know what? There's got to be a way that we can have this food hall that's full of options where the food is so good that a family can come, eat whatever they want. And even the people who are coming for their plant-based teenage son, who's kind of weird in their mind, can be delicious food and everybody can eat together.
Okay. That arc is making perfect sense, although very unexpected, by the way. But the thing that it's still... From a background of having built an investment company or a family office doing investments to changing to investing in things that have a sustainable, outcome to actually operating the business yourself. Why was that the approach? I mean, I guess you did invest in some respects.
Well, I'm not in the family office. I'm a serial entrepreneur. And my last business was with my daughter, which she started when she was 15. She was really pissed off about the chemicals that are in personal care products for humans in the environment. So she created, and I helped her, the safest full line of organic and natural personal care and cleaning products in the country without any harmful chemicals. And when I signed on to this, I thought that would be easy. But that blew up. Right? We did it as a direct sales company. Again, not for money. We just wanted to give this young girl a platform to share this incredible message with people. Do you know the chemicals actually get in your body and down the drain? And so what we learned from that business in 5 years, we went to a $60 million run rate. We had a 100,000 square foot manufacturing facility with shipping and a staff of 100 people and 20,000 consultants around the country, making a really good living, sharing important information. What I learned from that is if you figure out the messaging, and you figure out the product, you can scale it, and you can probably scale it rapidly to move the needle on something that needs to be changed. And so that's the thing that we learned in that business. So I was just trying to figure out the angle, and every day I'm still trying to figure it out. But
I love it. And I think, and I'm not too focused on the family office. I was curious as to how
Yeah.
you end up running that type of business and having that. It's almost a playbook in a way where you've actually said, we've worked out that if you want to shift the needle, you have to start by creating a great product and understanding the messaging. So host a potluck every 2 weeks, meet a bunch of the people who are either already there, who are on the fringes, and work out what works and what changes behavior at a small level. And then you work out the business and the economics, and then you work out how to scale. And that's kind of the playbook here.
Correct.
Super fun. I absolutely love it.
It is fun.
When are you coming to Australia?
Well, you know what? It was really interesting. One of the guys who we really love, who's a CEO, who we were looking at expanding Plant City with before COVID, is moving to Australia this week. He's from there. And we're having a conversation with him this week. So we never know.
We never know. Well, we probably do know. We just don't know when.
But I will say, when we were involved with Ava's business, Australia was the country that had the best companies that we could compare ourselves to, like the My Essence and some of the companies that were really making safer products. Australia was the place where they were coming from. And your population understood this issue more than anybody else.
Yeah. I mean, it's both. I don't know how it does this, but Australia's quite both conservative and progressive at the same time. I've never quite worked out how that's happened, but it seems to be the dynamic here.
We are. And actually,
that's amazing.
I grew up conservative, fiscally, I grew up that way. But as an environmentalist, you kind of have to look at things a little bit differently. So we made it.
Yeah, well, I think ultimately, if you're in the business of trying to shift the needle, you have to be open to change yourself and cognizant of how to affect change in others. And by definition, like, progressive is not really someone of a specifically political leaning, but someone who's open to change and interested in changing things from how they are to how they could be, with the intent that would be a better place. Sometimes misguided, but usually good.
I want to share with you how our son finally got us there, right? So we did all this research for the summer, and in the fall he went plant-based, and we thought, that's kind of interesting. Okay. And he's talking to us, and then he stopped because we weren't really hearing him. We were very busy with our businesses, and we weren't really hearing him. And then at Christmas, he said, you know what? I don't want any presents. I don't want any gifts. I just want you to watch these movies and give me the time to talk about them.
Wow.
And we're like, wow is right. There's a pretty prophetic, 23-year-old guy.
Right.
And so we sat down, and it only took two. The first one was Forks Over Knives, and the second one was Cowspiracy. If you'd told me that morning that I would be vegetarian, I would have called you a liar. The next morning, we called our son and we're like, all right, we're plant-based. What do you eat for breakfast? The science was so compelling. It's like, if you're an environmentalist and you listen to the science, it's like, this is the way we have to go. Okay. Now we're just going to do it. And then I've always had this thing in my heart where, if you have valuable information, right? And I've just learned that this is the way to be healthiest and this is the way to help the planet. Now I want everybody to learn, right? Sure. So I bought 30 copies of Dr. Greger's book, How Not to Die. I gave them to all my friends. Then I waited a week because surely they would have read it by then. And I called them, and not one of them had even cracked it open. And that's when I stepped back and I said, okay, punt, Kim. What was it that worked for you? It was the movies. Right. So that's when I started doing the movie nights at our house.
Right. Hey, I do have a question that sort of comes back to a little bit of where we were, but I think it's probably an important question. Is this a continuum for people? Like, someone starts off with the way they are, and the aim is to provide support and encouragement to move them further along towards plant-based and ultimately, ideally, get to completely plant-based. But there isn't a shame in still being halfway along or 2/3 of the way along.
No judgment, open tent. People find people where they are and just share the information. It's like a this, not a like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have a really great program in our community cellar that I'm really proud of. We brought in a big doc, Neil Barnard, to speak to some physicians in the area before we opened. Sure. And it had been on the schedule even before I decided to do this. And I did a private doc dinner with him. And afterwards, some of them came up to us and said, I really want to be involved in this. What can I do? And I said, I know exactly what I want you to do. I want you to start a group called Plant Docs in our lower level. I've got an office for you, and I want to run jump starts. Every month, we run 30 patients through a jump start. They start with blood work, 3.5 weeks of a whole food plant-based diet, and blood work. And nothing like blood work for a come to Jesus moment at the beginning. Exactly
as a physician.
And just say, okay, I need to fix this, this, and this. Can this really do that?
Right.
And then when you've got the numbers and you've got the science, right? There's the proof. You feel better. We have people telling us all the time, I feel better, I'm sleeping better, I'm pooping better, the whole thing's all better. I'm mentally happier, I'm clearer, I'm fat, like everything's better. But when you have the numbers in front of you, it's undeniable, right?
Right.
And so
beautiful. And probably one last question for me, which is the question I always like to ask, is at the point where you're at the moment, if someone's listening to this in whatever context, right? It might be a week from now, it might be months from now. Like, what's the thing that you're challenging people or asking people either to do or to do that would help this amplify?
Yeah, I would say watch the movie The Game Changers. It's the most recent one. It's a James Cameron, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Novak Djokovic produced film. And It's unbelievable. It's fun, it's funny, it's interesting, it's compelling. Loads of doctors, but in a really easy to watch format. And then, I'm always available. I'm an open book to try to help people. Then if you believe in it, try to take a piece of that heart, right? And share it with 10 friends. Can you imagine the amplification of that? Because when I'm at Plant City, every time I'm in the marketplace, some young guy comes in and he's looking around and he looks a little confused and he's tapping me on the shoulder and he's saying, can you help me? I just went plant-based. You know what the next sentence is? And I know what's coming. I just watched The Game Changers.
Right.
So,
perfect.
I'm actually working at a lot of schools and things like that. And I'm speaking with the people at James Cameron's foundation to ask if they'll shorten it to 45 minutes so I can get it into the schools. So
an actual part of the curriculum.
Well, or at least to show, in a course. Or a day where they all watch it, because I did bring it to a school with 1,000 inner city kids and admin, and they're moving towards plant-based. And it's, you can't expect the kids to eat the food if they don't understand the why. So you got to show them the why.
Sure. And the kids are probably in the best place to take that forward. Adults, you get kind of ingrained. As a child, you're open to the new information. And I mean, hopefully we should all be a bit more like that.
I want you to look at Neil Barnard's movie or video or YouTube about ditching dairy, or, what he talks about cheese. The cheese trap. That's the name of it. Sorry, Neil.
The cheese trap.
Cheese trap. TRA.
Oh, trap. You can say crap too. That's okay.
Great book.
I will absolutely check it out, and we'll be putting links into everything as well. I'll have to go back because there was a lot of links in there, which is wonderful.
Yeah, follow us on Instagram because we've got Plant City Providence and Plant City X, and follow us there because the food it'll blow your mind, and when you can see, take their favorite food and put it in Google, and then just put the word vegan in front of it. And I don't use the word vegan because there's some negative connotations, but for Google, lasagna, vegan lasagna, right?
Right.
Lentil stew.
Whatever, burgers, whatever.
The word vegan in front of it. There's thousands of recipes. So it's not like you have to give up anything. Right. It's just taking the effort to do it.
Amazing. Kim, we're going to leave it there for today. I think we could probably keep talking for a bit. I want to do a check-in in about 6 to 12 months because I really want to hear how this growth strategy is going, because I think you're going to absolutely knock it out of the park. But I'm excited that we caught you at the start of that curve.
I hope so. And not for me and not for money, but for the world really needs this. When people eat this food, they go away. And even the guy who got dragged in the front door, right? He'll come back to me and he'll say, my wife wanted me to do this and I didn't think I could, but now I'm eating this food and now I get it and I can do this. I can do this.
Yeah, that's a wonderful moment. Beautiful. Thank you, Kim. And we'll speak to you very soon.
Thank you, Vincent. Look forward to it.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Shape the System. As usual, if you'd like to suggest a guest, someone that you know who's helped change a system for the better, please go to www.shapethesystem.org, click on the top right-hand corner, then click Suggest Guest. Make sure that you click subscribe so that you get the new episode. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures. Connects founders to the services they need along their journey. Whether you are looking to refine your strategy, mature your finance function, prepare for a capital raise, expand abroad, or simply comply with regulatory requirements, they provide you with the support you need to drive your business forward.